Hi, everybody. My name is Jen Sear, and I'm a school reading specialist in Rochester, New Hampshire, and a moderator on this Facebook group. It is my pleasure to address the burning questions for May 1st. There are some doozies. So, the first question was about whether oo is considered part of the long U sound family. All right, and I know that we see it taught in conjunction with the long U sound, but it's really two different sounds. So there are some things before I jump to my Jamboard I want you to keep in mind, which is that there are 44 phonemes in our language and hundreds of spelling patterns. So we explain sounds and spellings in different terms, and this can be confusing for us and confusing for our students. So I wanted to explain the sounds and how they're used in instruction. I don't use the word sound family in my instruction. It's just not part of the programming that I use. However, I can understand why that would be terminology that would make sense. So, I'll roll with it. Let's take a look at our first Jamboard. Hopefully, it will come up in just a second. And I'm going to pause until it comes. All right, so if you take a look at my little sound sort here, I've included U, which is what I consider the long U sound, oo, and and that's because of the way they are taught in some of our programs. I know my program that I use teaches oo and U along with the vowel consonant E syllable pattern. So they're really two different sounds, but they're represented both by vowel consonant E. Like you can hear oo in flute, and you can hear U in mule. Okay. In our vowel circle, right, like what we see in Tools for Reading and some of our other tools, the oo and the U are really right next to each other in the vowel valley, but they still do represent two different phonemes. As you can see, there are many, many spelling patterns that use these two sounds. So in oo, we've got chew, the EW, OU can say oo, like in soup, UE can say oo, like in blue, UI, as in juice, OO, as in school, and then open syllable U can say oo in flute. And so when I teach open syllable, which comes after vowel consonant E, I also introduce the U saying oo as a phoneme there. So they go together in instruction, even though they are actually two very different sounds. Similarly, you will see OO that says as in book, introduced at the same time as OO that says oo, as in school, because it's the same spelling pattern, even though it's two different sounds. And what you can see here is that the contrast is very great, right? Is a different sound than oo. And you can see that it can be represented also by the letter U in the word put. So programs will organize these together so that kids can make more sense of the patterns they're seeing in their words. Sometimes this as in put is taught as a heart word. Now, we had another question about phoneme graphy mapping. All right, so phoneme graphy mapping is a great tool when you are working with students on spelling at the sound level. It is great, okay, especially when kids are mostly learning to read by sound spelling pattern. But please keep in mind that in our language, we use more than just sounds to spell, right? We use syllables and syllable types and position of patterns in a word. And we use morphemes and we use inflected endings and Greek and Latin roots. And so phoneme graphy mapping has limitations. And when we start to layer the English language onto phoneme graphy mapping, it can become very confusing for students. So we do have some rules that we adhere to. When doing phoneme grapheme mapping as an activity, you always map the sounds that are there, regardless of the spelling pattern or syllable type. Dividing words into syllables for syllable marking, you're actually imposing another set of rules on top of that. So just be careful that you're not confusing your students. So looking at my next Jamboard, all right, here's my phoneme grapheme map for the words that you asked me about. So for squeal, when you think about this QU phonogram, it's super tricky, okay? Some programs even teach it as multiple, k, u, 4 phonemes represented by QU and squeal. So technically, if I'm going to phoneme grapheme map this, I would put the Q in 2 boxes, put the U in 2 boxes. But you see what's happening here? It's muddying the waters and it's becoming very confusing. So I choose to just isolate the Q, say the Q says ku, isolate the U is acting like w, and I sound it out. S, ku, w, e, u, and each spelling pattern would end up in one box in a phoneme grapheme map. Someone else had a question about the word one, and I gave this one lots of thought. One, coming from Latin and then also involving the French O that sometimes says w, right? It's very tricky. So when I say the phonemes in one, I hear w, n, I hear 3 phonemes, but they're not represented traditionally. So I have to consider that the O in one represents 2 phonemes, right? W, the being kind of a schwa after the w, and then n would be the 3rd phoneme with my silent e. Similarly, once, w, n, s. Okay, so 4 boxes because it's 4 phonemes. However, guys, this is super confusing. So if you're teaching 6th graders, okay, they could probably figure this out. But if you just need kids to get to the heart of the word once because you're doing fairy tales, right, in CKLA or something, and you want them to know how to read the word once, then you can teach once as a heart word, which might be less of a memory load on kids. So you could just introduce once, teach them the sounds that are decodable, and then teach them that the O represents an unusual sound. W, n, s. Blend it together once and practice it a lot. All right. Thank you to the French language for these crazy words. Then I included fox because this is a word where phoneme grapheme mapping wouldn't be super challenging. The sounds in fox are f, k, s, right? So 4 sounds, but only 3 letters, so that X does double duty and gets to cover 2 boxes. I love phoneme grapheme mapping as an activity. I just think you want to choose your words wisely. All right, now, we had a question about open syllable O and what appear to be exceptions to the rule. So I did a little Google search and based on my prior knowledge, I thought an open syllable O by rule would say O, the long sound. But when I looked up the Uncovering the Logic of English website, it came up with the rule that the letter O can represent 3 sounds. A as in octopus, O as in no, and U as in do. And so it's not decodable, it's just rare. So a lot of programs will teach do and to as heart words, right? That makes things a little simpler. So if I'm going to my 3rd Jamboard, okay, I just included those 3 words and showed you how I would treat them, all right? So no has that micron over it and represents open syllable O. Octopus has the breve over the first O, representing, the short vowel in a closed syllable. And then do, I put on a pink because it's can be treated as a heart word, and I just gave it the beautiful umlaut to represent the oo sound. However, I can also teach kids that this is a little unusual, and we would sound it out d, oo, and the word is do, and let's learn that by heart. All right. We're cooking here. We had a question about any rules governing when to use TION versus SION. So I looked it up. There's this great website called freedictionary.com, and the rules governing TION and SION were, and I'm not kidding, 4 pages long. So, you could say that the suffix changes a verb to a noun. To act becomes an action. It can change an adjective to a noun. If you're feeling tense, you have tension. Okay, so that it has to do with the ION, which is a morpheme and a suffix. So you have to separate the TION from the SION, because basically the reasons why we use a T or an S, and we might say shun or we might say jeune for this one, okay, is that it has to do with the root or the base that is attached to. So when I go back to my Jamboard, really what you want to teach kids is very simple. The ION is the real affix, okay? And whether you're adding T or S has to do with which base word or root word you're using. Action and mention produce the sh sound. And that's our articulation, and that's what makes it easy. Also, the SION can represent the j, television, all right? And that's what kids need to know. Don't overcomplicate it. If you really want to know, you can go to that website and read the 4 pages. All right, we had another question about schwa. So I did not give schwa a huge amount of attention because I've covered schwa in Burning Questions week 3. So if you really want the long answer with the manipulatives, go back to Burning Questions week 3 and you can see me use my lips tools to explain schwa. What you need to know is that schwa happens in multisyllabic words usually, and it's around unaccented syllables. So the accented syllable in a multisyllabic word would have the most regular pronunciation, and the unaccented syllables lose some of their breath and their emphasis, and they sometimes become schwas. It accounts for vowel sounds and patterns that have lost their clarity and their emphasis. So if you think about banana, right? The first syllable, BA, is a schwa and says The nan is regularly pronounced, and the na is another schwa. If you think about the word picture, here we have a U-R-E that should produce a more emphasized sound, but because pick is the accented syllable, the ch just becomes more de-emphasized and can be considered a schwa. Speaking of picture, we had a very specific question about the words picture and capture. So there's a few things happening here. Okay, first of all, when you think about that T-U-R-E, that is something that I also explained in Burning Questions week 3 called co-articulation. Okay, it's the affrication of that T. Okay, it picks up the U. It's followed by a R liquid, and what happens, like in the word train, is when you co-articulate it, it comes out more like a ch, like an affricated consonant. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing that's happening is the schwa, as I mentioned before. And also, we see this in words of French origin. So picture and capture originated in Latin, but as they evolved into French, they lost the hard T and picked up more of the ch sound. So there are rules that attach themselves to the T-U-R-E, but it's super vague. Words with a ch sound in the final syllable may be spelled to you, like in spatula, okay, I would say that if this is scripted into your program, then just be aware that this is a co-articulation and origin issue and that you need to teach words like this directly, provide students with lots of exposure. And then when you're asking kids to spell these words, allow them to use their word study notebook to check their answers. All right. We had another question asking us to syllabicate the word important. So let's think about important. First thing you've got to think about is that morpheme A-N-T that says ent. There's another schwa, right? The A-N-T makes things into a noun, okay? So it can indicate a thing like a mutant, and it can also indicate an adjective, like something that is important or someone who is pregnant. All right, so morphemes have meaning, but they don't always follow our sound rules. They're ruled by our articulation. So important, I consider 3 syllables. Im, por, and tent. M is closed because of the short vowel I, and it is closed off by an M. Por, I would circle the OR and call that an R-controlled syllable. And tent is a closed syllable, but it's also a schwa because it is de-emphasized in the pronunciation of the word, so that what should be an sounds more like in, right? So there's our friend schwa again. Schwa is everywhere. I guess you could say schwa happens, right? Schwa happens. All right. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that I was able to answer your questions. Do contribute to the burning questions for next week if this has raised more questions for you. And then don't be afraid to use the excellent resources that are out there. I used Uncovering the Logic of English. I use dictionary.com. I use Webster's Merriam-Webster. I use all kinds of stuff in order to answer these questions. Take care, and let's power through the rest of this school year, everybody. Bye-bye.